Now we are going to have a case-based group discussion on a topic of medical management of advanced PT, cognitive impairment with visual hallucinations, motor fluctuations and dyskinesias, and impulse control disorders. Now we have, since Professor Vinay sir is not here, this is going to be moderated by Dr. Rupa ma'am, who is a assistant professor at the Department of Neurology, AIIMS PGI. Ma'am has won various awards. She has won various awards to her name, as Early Career Research Award, Gold Medal in the Video Tournament, to name a few. She has more than 40 publications in various journals, and she has a special interest in movement disorders. Along with that, group-based, case-based discussion will be done by Professor Dr. Sahil sir and Dr. Ritusri ma'am. Dr. Ritusri is an assistant prof at the Department of Neurology, PGMR Chandigarh. She has more than 25 articles, publications into her various national and international journals to her name, and she has keen interest in neuromuscular, neuroimmunology, and neuroinfectious diseases. Over to Dr. Rupa ma'am for the moderation and case-based discussion. And along with that, three senior residents, Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Satish Barki of 6th semester of AIIMS, and Dr. Sukriya of 5th semester of PGI Chandigarh will be participating in the case-based discussions. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Dipendra, for that kind introduction. So welcome everyone to this session, which is a case-based and interactive teaching learning session. I hope to continue the flow of the talk from the previous talk, which was young onset Parkinson's disease. We will now be discussing three important clinical problems that we may face when treating patients with Parkinson's disease. Without further ado, may I invite Dr. Sahil sir to present a case of Parkinson's disease with cognitive impairment and hallucination, and let us learn together how we would manage these issues. Dr. Sahil, please.
Thank you, Rupa. I'm sharing my slides. My slides visible?
Yes, sir. You can put it on slideshow, please, sir.
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening,
Hello. Good evening.
I'm just going to, ma'am, I'm just going to introduce Professor Vinay sir.
Yes, Dipender, go ahead.
Ma'am, Professor Vinay Goyal is a former professor at the Department of Neurology, AIIMS, and at present he is Director Neurology, Medanta. He is the president of MDSI for the 2020 and 2021 session, and he is editor-in-chief AIAN since 2018. Sir has won prestigious award, Visis Chikitsa Ratna Award, Sri Om Bansal Shiv Shakti Group Award, to name a few. Sir has close to 300 publications in various international and national peer-reviewed journals and written more than 30 chapters in various books. Over to you, sir, for the moderation of case-based discussion. The case-based discussion, the topic is medical management of advanced PD, cognitive impairment with visual hallucinations, motor fluctuations and dyskinesias, and impulse control disorders. The case will be discussed by Dr. Sahil Mehta sir, Dr. Rupa Rajan and Dr. Ritusri ma'am, and it will be this question answer with the senior residents of AIIMS and PGI, Dr. Satish Barki, Dr. Radhakrishnan, and Dr. Supriya Sarvana of the PGMI Chandigarh will be done. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm happy that still I've been considered as faculty of AIMS. Otherwise, I thought after 10 months I'll be out of the circuit, but I'm happy to be among people whom I belong for last almost 25 years. So let's start the proceeding. How is going to be?
So Dr. Sahil will start with the first case.
Okay, wonderful.
Are my slides visible?
नहीं, अभी आपने कनेक्ट नहीं किया शायद. I don't see resident. Mostly it looks like they are faculty. So are the resident at different places they are looking at it? Or we are the only one who are discussing among you?
We are there, sir.
Sorry?
I'm Dr. Radhakrishna, sir. I'm there.
I know Radha, I know you. I'm seeing there are only 24 attendees right now. So most of us are here, or there is a separate panel for viewing?
There is a separate panel for viewing, sir.
Okay, that's good. Okay.
Sir, there is a
Yeah,
separate
perfect.
panel for audience, but the 4 residents who are
ठीक है.
participating in the discussion part are live in this Zoom platform.
Wonderful. I agree. चलो जी, शुरू करो.
Dr. Vinay, good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Dr. Mamta?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Pleasure. It's indeed a pleasure.
Vinay, is it a virtual photo or you got such a big bookshelf now?
यार ये secret है. I can't tell you now. I can only demonstrate what it is so that you will have the answer to this. नहीं वो मैं दिखा रहा हूँ. बताओ ये वाला अच्छा है या ये वाला अच्छा है?
नहीं, यही अच्छा है, यही अच्छा है.
So my slides are visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
now they are visible.
So I'll be discussing the case of advanced Parkinson's disease with the cognitive impairment and visual hallucinations. So this is a case 1, who's a 59-year-old male who's a known case of idiopathic Parkinson's disease since 2004, and his symptoms started with tremor in the left upper limb and gradually progressed to involve right side, and then he started developing bradykinesia, rigidity. In 2016, he developed gait dysfunction with postural instability. There was no history of freezing of gait. But since 2018, the patient's son started complaining that there's a history of forgetfulness. He used to forget where he has kept his wallet. He used to forget to switch off the lights. However, there was no history suggestive of any visuospatial disorientation. And these cognitive problems didn't interfere in his activities of daily living. And since March 2020, he started having complaints of illusions. He started mistaking pillows and blankets for person. He had formed visual hallucinations in the form of bearded men sitting on sofa, and these were associated with delusions of persecution. He was on levodopa carbidopa on 6 times a day, razagiline 1 milligram per day, ropinirole in a dose of 4 milligram per day, and pacitane 2 milligram twice daily. And on screening cognitive examination, his MoCA was 22/30. Another case, a case of 72-year-old male. He's a case of idiopathic Parkinson's disease since 2010. Again, it was a tremor predominant disease with more symptoms on the right side, with associated bradykinesia and rigidity. But for the last 2 years, he started developing forgetfulness in the form of forgetting the ways to the bathroom, and the cognitive problems progressed to an extent that lately he didn't even remember the names of his children, confuses them with his own siblings, and he also had symptoms suggestive of orthostatic hypotension leading to falls. His MoCA was 16/30, and there was also history of visual hallucinations in the last 1 month. He started seeing children playing in the house with history of delusions of persecution. He was on Syncopon 4 times a day, midodrine 5 milligram twice daily, and donepezil was added on OPD basis in the dose of 10 milligram once daily. So my first question to the senior residents is there. What are the diagnostic criteria for PD psychosis, and can you comment how common is psychosis in Parkinson's disease?
So how they are going to answer? Is it number wise or?
It's voluntary, sir. If you are not voluntary, if they're not answering, you can ask them also.
Okay, okay. Oh, but this is not a difficult. See, we don't have a 100% correct answer or 100% wrong answer. So whatever you will answer, we'll modify it. So take it that way.
Sir, PD psychosis is
Hello, Dr.
Satish, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, the PD psychosis is not very common, but not rare also. But the thing is, it is most commonly associated, the causes will be PD per se in advanced diseases. And otherwise, the medications are the most common causes of PD psychosis, especially the anticholinergics and even that's it.
How are you going to approach this patient?
Sir, in a case of any patient who is presenting with psychosis, the most first important thing is we need to see if there is any precipitating factors, especially like infections, delirium in these patients, especially because most of these patients are older. So if we find any such
what other factors, Dr. Satish,
Yes, sir.
like infection,
come.
what other factors you would look into it?
Yes, sir. So other factors are usually any change in drug dosages, the dopaminergic levodopa dosage, or dopamine agonist dosages are also associated with psychosis. Then addition of drugs like anticholinergics can also cause.
Yes.
So once we identify a risk factor,
No, my
then
my question is the patient was settled on given those drugs and now he has developed psychosis. So like you mentioned, you will look for infection. What other things you will look into it to say that could be the precipitating event?
Sir,
Metabolic disturbances also
which is-
can be looked for.
yes.
Any hypo.
Yes, which is a very common thing. You know, people on stable days come to you that he is developing psychosis. That's where
Hyponatremia
the
is common
problem.
in elderly people.
What?
Hyponatremia and other
Yes,
metabolic
electrolyte hyponatremia. Yes. What else? If you say infection, which infection do you always look at? Which I always do.
UTI is
UTI.
common in elderly people.
UTI. UTI because they never have a symptom, but if you come so I have 2-3 reasons. Patients coming to you with new onset hallucination, new onset psychosis, new onset recent worsening. I always look at UTI because these are some of the symptoms which will tell you there is a change in dopamine dynamics. Okay, na?
yes.
Yes, very good.
So once
Yes,
the
Dr.
things
Sai.
are the risk factors are identified and treated, if the psychosis gets resolved, then possibly it was because of those things. If it doesn't get resolved, then we are left with two scenarios. If the psychosis are mild and not interfering with his activities of daily living, then we just follow them up and wait for any serious thing. If the psychosis, if the hallucinations or delusions are pretty much severe, interfering with care and also activities of daily living, then we will possibly see if there are any drugs which are causing. And all the anti-Parkinson drugs are known to cause psychosis. So we will try to withdraw the drugs which are least effective, like anticholinergics would be. I would try to withdraw it first. Maybe then we can.
Before you
yes,
tell us the management, my question again to you will be when you will decide to treat patient who have psychosis.
If the delusions are threatening or if the daily
Threatening means?
activity or social interaction is interfering with the activities of the patient, then we should treat. And
So
we
one
should,
is when it is affecting the individual's daily activity of life.
yes.
and we should
I
check.
also
we should check for any precipitating factors, even if it is not affecting that factors. We should anyway check, and we should try to.
No, that will be part of the
rule out.
management. Mano, what I say there are two things. Either it is bothering the patient, so it's affecting his activity of life, socially unacceptable symptoms, or it's affecting the family.
Yes.
Sometimes the family is also equally disturbed. The patient is constantly complaining, there is somebody in my room, there is somebody in my room. If the family is not bothered, and if the person is telling 10 times or 5 times, there is somebody in my room, otherwise is doing well with the drugs, I would be little hesitant to change it, and I would explain, and if the patient is able to accept it, it is fine. So if the patient is able to accept, but the family is not able to accept, say no, सारे दिन बोलते हैं कोई मेरे कमरे में बैठा है, कोई मेरे कमरे में, that is also become a equally acceptable symptom that we need to treat, है ना?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So once we decide it as bothersome,
yes, Dr. Sahil, please bring the case 1, which is more interesting to me.
Okay, sir.
Case 1, last page. Yeah, next page. So, Dr. Satish, this is the prescription patient is on.
Yes, sir.
And now he has troublesome hallucinations.
Yes, sir.
There are two things. One, with hallucinations which are present throughout the day. So, what is sundowning phenomena?
Sir, it is in this phenomena, usually the hallucinations or delusions, the psychosis part worsens as the day progresses, sir. And he's much better in the morning times.
Yes.
So, and usually patients who are better
during,
yes, sir.
Or only in the evening time or late evening time.
Yes.
And what is the reason for this? Why do they get in evening and not in morning or daytime?
It is due to alteration of circadian pacemakers in the brain. Due to the alteration in neurotransmitters, the circadian rhythm will get disrupted, and in the evening they will be more confused, or they will be disoriented to time.
Why?
So,
because the
degeneration.
the sensory inputs also decreases by evening.
Yes.
There is less sound in the surrounding, there is less activity, the natural light has gone, so there are less number of people from the home scene, so it's kind of a lonely time. That's the time they get to all these symptoms which are more exaggerated or perceived better. So that's why they complain they are more in the evening. So Dr. Satish, in this given case scenario, when the patient is on 600 milligram of levodopa and rasagiline 1 milligram, droperidol 4 milligram, and Pacitine 6 milligram per day, and has significant hallucinations, so what you will do now?
Sir, the first drug I would try to withdraw will be Pacitine, sir, because it is the drug which will give you the least motor benefit in such a.
I agree. But my question also will be, this is, I was calculating he is around 74-year-old gentleman.
Yes.
If he would have come to you without having hallucination, would you like to give Pacitine to him now?
No, sir, because the older age is the most determinant factor for cognitive decline in these patients.
Yes, so otherwise it's not a drug of choice at this age. So if whether will patient will come with psychosis or without psychosis, I'll take it off the Pacitine. What other drug you will do then?
So then next drug I would take out will be Ropac, the Ropironol, which he was on. And the last
so when you
would be
last will be
the levodopa, and before that I may decrease the dopamine agonist also, sir.
Oh no, I would stop dopa agonist second. Then would you like to decrease levodopa or do something different?
Sir, it depends on his motor functions, because once we decrease those drugs also, if his motor disability worsens, then at 74 years, he would be having difficulty carrying out his activities of daily living, and even the caregiver burden will worsen. So I would rather add as antipsychotic in such a patient rather than take.
He already has a 16 years of illness and 600 milligram of levodopa. So I would be very surprised that when you take off levodopa, he will not have any motor worsening.
Yes.
So levodopa is like a petrol in the car.
Yes.
So if you take off petrol in the car, they will not be able to move around. So that will worsen the quality of life. So rather than reducing the levodopa, my choice always will be to add antipsychotic drug at this stage, if you excluded all treatable causes, isn't it?
Yes.
So what will be your choice of drug and why?
Sir, usually we would like to add a second generation or typical antipsychotics like quetiapine, then clofazimine, clozapine, sorry, not clofazimine, clozapine,
Yeah.
and even pimavanserin can also be.
Fine. Why not the other antipsychotic drugs?
So olanzapine
Reserpine,
and other
olanzapine.
they would may precipitate NMS in such patients.
Or they may worsen the
worsen the motor.
symptoms.
Yes.
So how much will be the dose of quetiapine if you are using quetiapine?
Sir, I would try to keep it as low as possible. Start with the 12.5 milligram HS, and we can go up to keep gradually increasing and maximum dose of about 150 milligram also. So,
Okay.
but yes.
Anybody else? How much maximum dose you will use quetiapine?
Quetiapine, maximum dose up to 400 milligrams we can use, but I would also like to start at low doses and gradually.
No, maximum dose is up to 600 milligram, but I am comfortable up to 400 milligram. If it is not controlled, then I'll contact my psychiatric colleague कि भाई अब आप भी थोड़ा सा देखो, है ना? Because I know what are the drugs they are going to add, which are going to increase my problem rather than improving psychosis. Wonderful.
So we also have a resident from PGI, Dr. Sukriya.
Okay. So for PGI resident, the next question is why not clozapine, which is a wonderful drug. Why do you prefer quetiapine and not clozapine?
Clozapine will have some side effects like granulocytosis and all, and like regular blood count should be monitored for clozapine, whereas quetiapine, the side effects are quite less when compared to clozapine.
So that's the major reason that because of its side effect profile, we avoid using it. Though it's a wonderful drug, it controls symptoms very well. So some of my patients who first go to psychiatrists, they prefer to use clozapine, but that requires a hematological profile monitoring every 2 weeks initially, then every 3 months. That's the reason we avoid using clozapine. Wonderful. What else? Any next case or next question? So in the second case, okay, let's look at the drugs. So this patient has hallucination, and patient is not on he is not on triaxiphenidil, he is not on dopa agonist. Now what you would do? Does donepezil add to the problem?
Donepezil might not add to the problem.
That can also cause hallucinations, no?
But sir,
some people
are usually even if the patient has underlying dementia with psychosis.
So usually rivastigmine and donepezil can be given even in psychosis. They help in visual hallucinations also.
Yeah, you are right. Rather, these are the major symptoms which can be controlled. But you know, some of the patients, when you start donepezil, they start complaining of new onset hallucination. You have to keep that in mind. Okay, na?
Yes, sir.
Chalo. So we have a next case, or we have to discuss this case in a different way now?
We can sir ask about the dementia part also to them.
हाँ, वही मैं सोचा तो वो तो आया ही नहीं इसमें. Interesting case तो उसी content. What is the second question?
I have put some questions, sir. If you want, wonderful. I can go.
Yeah, please.
Through the slides.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of residents, these diagnostic criteria for PD psychosis, they were published in 2007. And the important point to highlight is that even illusions and false sense of presence is considered as one of the core symptoms. And these should be present at least for more than 1 month in a patient who is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease.
Yes. So I have, आप बता दो फिर मैं पूछता हूँ एक.
Sir, आप पूछ लो. I've just reviewed the letter.
So yeah, no. So my question is, you know, when you are using any scale for psychosis, so how would you use it? in last 24 hours, last 7 days, last 2 weeks, or last 1 month. Because symptoms are variable. So whenever you use a scale for psychosis, what period you will count to grade the psychosis?
I think last
We don't use last 1 week, correct. We don't use these psychosis scale commonly, but all the trials, they use that the symptom in last 7 days. So average symptom in last 7 days we count and then grade it. Hai na?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Next. Yes. Yes, Dr. Sahil.
So the prevalence is usually time dependent, and it is usually appears in the second half of the disease. And most of the things we already know, but what I find out in the literature that even these hallucinations, predominantly the illusions and the false sense of presence, even early PD, they can occur in around 30% of the patients. And this was it's a study in 2016 in which they reported that minor hallucinations can occur even in drug-naive Parkinson's disease patients and even in the premotor phase. So this is a new
But
thing.
now I would also challenge that are these patients really having Parkinson's disease or they are DLB?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that if somebody gets an psychosis in pre-motor symptom or very early phase, then I would always doubt is it really a Parkinson's disease or a spectrum of DLB. But they can very early can present like these patients.
But sir, they mentioned that these in the pre-motor phase they occurred 7 months to 8 years before the onset of motor symptoms.
Okay, wonderful.
And then the phenomenology of psychosis we have already discussed, which can range from passage hallucinations, illusions, false sense of presence, and then gradually it worsens. Initially, the hallucinations with insight is present, and then without insight, and then delusions can occur, and they worsen according to the worsening in the UPDRS stage.
But if there are auditory hallucinations, then because
auditory
predominantly
hallucinations
they
are
are
usually described late in the course of the illness. What I came across, visual hallucinations are more common, but auditory can also occur, and even in other modalities can also occur in these patients.
Or they may have a primary psychiatric illness associated with Parkinson rather than Parkinson associated psychosis. If you have auditory hallucination, so that will tell me is it related to Parkinson or they may have an associated primary psychiatric diagnosis.
Sir, gentle reminder regarding the time. I think we should move on to the next case. There are two more faculty waiting for
Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah. The rest of the things we have discussed mainly.
अरे आपने इतना बढ़िया बना रखा था, हमने तो बगैर उसके सारा डिस्कस कर लिया.
Sahil sir, you can use a couple of minutes to go through it. I think it's all interesting slides.
Yes.
You can use.
हाँ, आप बता ही दो. डॉक्टर साहिल आप बता दो, बहुत अच्छा बनाया आपने.
This is a mnemonic which I came across. Like sir was also saying that if a patient came with acute onset psychosis, so we should rule out all the precipitating factors ranging from Parkinson's disease medications, any systemic illness, metabolic dysfunction, and even sensory deprivation, which sir was saying, hearing or visual impairment, infections. And as these patients have also history of falls, so structural lesions in the form of SDH should always be kept in mind. And the order of tapering of anti-Parkinsonian medication we have already discussed. And
please go back. Please go back previous slide.
The most yes, sir.
No, ये वाली slide. So triaxiphenidil, amantadine, MOBI. No, there'll be. I would debate amantadine versus dopa agonist. It's an individual choice. I prefer to bring down dopa agonist first rather than amantadine. ठीक है ना?
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Probably this is dependent on the more efficacious drugs are probably tapered last.
Yes.
With the propensity to induce hallucination and psychosis.
Agree. I would give my reason also. You remove dopa agonists in a patient, they are weak anti-Parkinsonian drugs. Whereas if you reduce amantadine, they are little stronger anti-Parkinsonian drugs. So given a choice, if I would reduce amantadine, their Parkinsonian symptom will come more as compared to dopa. That's my explanation for reducing dopa agonist before amantadine. We discussed these points, yeah.
Yes. So can you tell me which of the following is a particular concern with quetiapine? Supriya, can you answer this?
They already answered it, I think.
With quetiapine, which of the following you think is the side effect of quetiapine?
Hepatotoxicity, sir.
No, it's orthostatic hypotension, and we should be vigilant about that.
Sure.
And the new FDA-approved treatment, somebody was saying, I just want to
Pimavanserin.
The main mechanism of action is that it is the inverse agonist as 5-HT2A receptors, and there is no action at dopaminergic, adrenergic, muscarinic, or histaminergic receptors, and it does not worsen Parkinsonism. And this is the only FDA-approved atypical antipsychotic for PD psychosis, and it has a long half-life and has a once-a-day administration. Its adverse
Is it available in India?
No, sir, I don't think so.
Not, no?
Just for the theoretical part, I just wanted to discuss that.
The
adverse effects include QT prolongation, peripheral edema, and confusion. And people have also given algorithms if the patient is on quetiapine or clozapine, and if you want to initiate pimavanserin, then how to do it. This we have discussed. And then the major difference between PD MCI and PD dementia is that if the activities of daily living are getting affected because of cognitive issues, then it is dementia. Otherwise, it is MCI. And the important point is that when we test, we have to test all the cognitive domains, as attention, executive function is much more affected, and visual spatial, rather than core memory features or language. So the last question is, which of the following is FDA approved for dementia associated with Parkinson's disease?
Reverse.
Yeah. And this was based on this trial which was published in 2004 in New England Journal of Medicine. All of the other drugs, the evidence is not that, but practically we do use donepezil and also. But
please go back. I think this is a very important discussion. No, the drugs, yes. So donepezil, memantine, rivastigmine, quetiapine. Donepezil and rivastigmine are very well studied in dementia and Parkinson's disease. You know, regarding FDA approval, sometimes always there is a bias. Drug which is developed in Europe may not get FDA approval for a long time. So I don't buy this FDA approval theory. If there are enough randomized trials to prove the efficacy, I would be equally impressed. But the only problem is
that there were certain trials on donepezil, but the efficacy was not much shown in those trials, which was shown with this rivastigmine.
I read it long back, so I would not be able to comment right now.
Yes.
Even in DLB also, rivastigmine is approved, and I mean more.
That was long. That was 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Dr. Ravi Anand was the chief investigator of that trial when they did rivastigmine. Next.
That's all from my side.
Wonderful. I think that there are a few questions I wanted to ask. You know, which patient will develop dementia in patient with Parkinson's disease? Is it related to disease duration? Is it related to disease severity? Is it related to the age of the patient?
Sir,
anyone can take this question.
One thing is disease severity has definitely has a role to play. If it is a PIGD type of presentation, where
we are talking pure Parkinson's disease, clean Parkinson.
So both duration and severity of the disease have a role to play.
Okay. Any other answer?
Sir.
Satish?
Yes, so the age and the duration and the severity, I think all the three, and otherwise along with that other risk factors, sir. To add to that, any underlying vascular risk factors.
No, that's separate. That's separate. Yes. I agree. I think the most important factor is age. So it's age-related phenomena, predominantly age-related phenomena. So if you have young onset Parkinson's disease, and if you have an age match control, and if you look at the cognition, they did study a lot of study in MCI, because MCI was a new evolving I think we wrote an article. I think Dr. Deepa Dash was one of the author. You can read that article, MCI in Parkinson's disease. So it is the age was the most important factor which will decide cognitive decline, and not the total duration of disease or age of onset of Parkinson's disease. Yes, next. Let's go to the next.
Shall I present the next case, sir?
Yes. Good evening. How are you?
Good evening, sir. So, thank you for
मुझे लग रहा है मेरा एग्जाम हो रहा है. मुझे पता नहीं था, नहीं तो मैं थोड़ा पढ़ के आता ना भाई.
So now we move on to another important issue in the medical management of advanced Parkinson's disease. So this case, we will discuss a patient with motor fluctuations and dyskinesias. So the learning objectives of this session, this particular segment, would be to identify the different types of motor complications that occur in advanced Parkinson's disease, to enumerate the various pharmacological strategies available for managing motor complications, and to understand the approach to choosing among the available pharmacological strategies for an individual patient. So,
please go back for a second. Yes.
So, although it's a very vast topic, we would try to summarize the key points here. So, we will.
How many minutes we have, Snigdha? Tell us, otherwise, so हम लोग 2 घंटे डिस्कस कर सकते हैं इस पे ना.
Sir, actually we have 20 minutes for each case, sir. So we have 20 minutes for the second case and
20 minutes for this.
more.
Good enough.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
And
yes.
one more 20 minutes again for third case, sir.
ठीक है जी.
So this
This
is
is
our
the last. Is this the last discussion of the day, or there are still pending cases?
Sir, there is one more lecture by Professor Prasad, sir.
अरे तो फिर तो टाइम से करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है.
Yes.
I want to listen to him also. Yes, please go ahead.
So this is our patient. He is a 58-year-old gentleman who is walks into your OPD, and he is a known Parkinson's disease for the last 5 years. He is currently on levodopa carbidopa immediate release preparation 2500 3 times in a day. And now he comes to you saying that he has no effect of medication over the past 1 year. His rest tremors have increased and his gait has become slow and shuffling. How will you approach this patient further?
Ma'am, first I would like to ask the patient whether how he's taking the medication. If he's taking
No,
along
I
with
thought
the food.
I thought when there is a case presented by AIMS faculty, so PGI resident would defend, or vice versa. Is it not like that?
No, sir, we can choose anybody. It's Dr. Sukriya.
Okay, so yeah, maybe let's choose somebody else. See, me and Dr. Rupa have been teaching our students, so they know how we would do it. So I want to know how the others handle this situation. Yes.
The patient is on immediate release combination of levodopa and carbidopa. So, like first, I would like to ensure whether the patient is taking it, whether the patient is compliant to the medication or not, and whether they are maintaining a proper gap between meals and the medication. Ma'am, am I audible?
You are audible.
Yes.
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear us, Sukriya?
Yes, yes, we can.
The internet connection. So, like, I would like to ensure whether the patient is maintaining a proper gap between the meal and the medication, because most of them used to take the medication along with the food, leading to reduced absorption. And if the patient compliance is very good and on TDS, if the patient is not getting on, then like patient has started developing the motor complications. Like either it could be a wearing off effect, or it could be a no on or a delayed on. So I can either add a sustained release of Syndopa to him, or I can try increasing the immediate release dose of Syndopa.
So I have few questions. I'll take the case little beyond this case. You must have seen patients who come to you with early Parkinson's disease. They are on preparation which are 110 milligram of levodopa carbidopa combination. You are aware about this, no?
Yes, sir.
And this is 125 milligram combination.
Yes, sir.
Some people are given 110, so 100 milligram carbidopa and 10 milligram, 100 milligram levodopa and 10 milligram carbidopa, that 110 combination. So in beginning, I see a lot of people use 110 milligram combination versus 125 milligram combination. What is your take on that? Is it a good idea to use 110 milligram or it's a bad idea to use 110 milligram?
So, like, if the patient is complaining of more peripheral side effects of dopa, like nausea, hypertension, then maybe
Patient has come to you with 2 years mild symptom, and I'm doubting it is really Parkinson or not. And a lot of people prescribe them levodopa, carbidopa of 110 combination. So, is it a right strategy or a wrong strategy? That's my question.
We should go for 100 milligram along with 25 milligram of carbidopa.
Why not 10 milligram of carbidopa? What's wrong with that?
Sir,
you are right actually, but I want to know the explanation. Yes.
The peripheral metabolism of levodopa will be much more with carbidopa 10 milligram only. So they may land up in side effects like nausea, vomiting, and all. So it's better.
So how much milligram of carbidopa is required per day to inhibit dopa decarboxylase inhibitor per day? That's my question.
Per day, sir?
Yes. So it is at least 50 to 75 milligram of carbidopa is required per day. That will be the ideal situation so that best that the levodopa is not metabolized in periphery. If you use 110 milligram, then only 30 milligram carbidopa is there. So there is more peripheral metabolism and more side effects. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Second thing you said, you will use sustained release preparation. You know, when somebody has a wearing off phenomena, what is wearing off phenomena, by the way?
So actually, wearing off means initially when we start the patient on low dose of syndopa, they will have a good effect. They will say like the effect will last for around 3 to 4 hours. But with the increase in duration of time, they will say that the effect of syndopa has not attained, or they will say it lasts only for 2 hours. After that, there is no effect of medicine.
What is the half-life of levodopa?
Sorry, sir?
Half-life of levodopa?
Sir, it is 90 minutes.
So it's very small. And clinical effect on an average patient when you give one tablet 3 times a day empty stomach will last anything between 4 to 6 hours. Okay. So wearing off is scientifically defined as if the effect does not last more than 4 hours. This definition is especially for doing clinical trials. You know, so that you have a fixed criteria. The effect of one dose does not last more than 4 hours is called wearing off effect. But practically, when you give one tablet 3 times a day, then effect will last around 4 to 6 hours. Then if the effect of first tablet does not last up to the second tablet and it vanishes before this, then practically we call it a wearing off effect. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So second, your point was, so what you said it should be taken empty stomach. Okay.
So actually there should be a gap between the meal as well as the medication.
So how much gaps you would like to have it?
30 to 45 minutes minimum gap should be there because the food, when they contain like amino acids, they used to compete with levodopa for absorption. So minimum of 45 minutes gap should be given.
Wonderful. There is a study which is a very old study, I think in some 70s. So they did this. They had seen that there is a 30% loss of levodopa drug level if you give it protein. So it's best to give, what I prescribe is I say 1 hour before and 1 hour after the you want to take the drug, you should remain empty stomach. That will give the best effect. Okay. My second question will be, if you are prescribing the drug 3 times a day, what will be the timing to prescribe the drug?
So
what time they should take the drug?
Some patients, like early morning when they wake up, they'll have this echinacea. So like at that time, we have to give them as soon as they wake up. Like an empty stomach, we have to start the medication.
So and he gets up at 6 o'clock. So first tablet is 6 o'clock. Yes, second tablet at?
So if we are starting initially, then maybe 4 to 5 hours gap we can give before, and the evening one they will take before supper.
Okay, so I wanted to hear that. No, I wanted to hear that. See, a levodopa is like a petrol. So if you require levodopa when you want to move. It is very common, the patient, when they were coming, they were taking 1 tablet after breakfast, 1 tablet after lunch, and 3rd tablet after dinner. So when you take 1 tablet after meals, so first of all, there is a 30% loss of the drug. So that's a wrong strategy. Secondly, 3rd tablet when you take it after the meal or dinner and then you sleep. So you don't require a petrol to park the car. You require petrol to drive the car. So taking the drug at the supper time is again waste of the drug. So what I prescribe is 6 o'clock morning, as early as when you get up in the morning, you are empty stomach, take one drug. Second tablet at 11 o'clock, so you have to target your breakfast before 10 o'clock. Third tablet at 4 o'clock, so you target your third tablet at least after 2 hours of dinner. Lunch. So, and when you take 4 o'clock tablet, if the effect is lasting 5 o'clock, if you will have effect up to 9 o'clock. And this is the time, by the time most of the people would like to go to bed. So my strategy will be 6, 11, 4. And when I'm giving it 4 times, it will be 6, 10, 2, 6. So there is a 4 hours effect. If you take 6 o'clock class medicine, your effect will last up to 10 o'clock. And not at bedtime or after dinner or just before dinner. So I want to have the effect of 4 or 5 hours. So you should take the one drug which is 4 or 5 hours before you go to the bed. That is my strategy of giving the drug. Second thing you said about SR preparation when there is a wearing off. Please understand, all sustained release preparations have a slower peak of onset of drug level. So when you give sustained release preparation in a patient who is already having wearing off phenomena, so there is an initial lack of effect and then later on lack of effect. So sustained release preparations are actually, I don't like giving them in the daytime. I only want to use them in the night time. So there is and you have to give at least 1/3 more drug to maintain the same drug level as a basic physiology, as a basic pharmacology. So I don't like giving sustained release preparation in patient with wearing off phenomena. So now the question is, you rightly said, first I will check whether the patient is taking empty stomach. And timing. I tell you about 30% of the time, I control wearing off phenomena just by timing. That 6, 11 and 4, if you re-time them, they will be able to control their symptoms because they are now having a more drug during daytime. So even if after taking 6, 11, 4, the patient is having wearing off phenomena. So what will be your next step to improve the drug level? Yes, anybody?
Sir, we can add entacapone.
Wonderful. So how many tablets of entacapone you will add per day?
The dose for which wearing off is noticed, for that dose, every dose 200 mg of entacapone should be added.
So is it 100 milligram or 200 milligram or 400 milligram of entacapone?
Sir, if the patient is having wearing off with every dose, then 200 total of 600 mg of entacapone per day.
No. You have to
200.
Unfortunately, there is no 100 milligram available in India. But if you look at the studies of entacapone, 100 milligram and 200 milligram has almost same effect. Okay. So unfortunately, there is no 100 milligram tablet available in India. They are all 200 milligram. So otherwise, if the patients are taking 6 doses, then you can give 100 milligram or tablet rather than giving 200 milligram per day. Okay. So what precaution you will advise them whenever you prescribe entacapone?
That levodopa dose might need to be reduced sometimes because the side effects can be there.
Yes,
nausea.
That is usually a case when you are adding entacapone when they are on higher dose. Then they may develop dyskinesia, so you have to reduce the levodopa dose by 1/3. But here is a situation when the patient already having wearing off phenomena initially, so I think that he should be able to take care of it. Any other precaution you want to mention? Patient may come to you next day, but no, there was something wrong and I can't take this drug. So what's gone wrong?
Anything you want to warn them?
You should tell them.
About the discoloration.
Discoloration.
Orange color of the urine.
Yes. It's very frightening for some time. That next day morning he avoids and he realizes, oh my God, yellow is completely urine, orange or yellow or dark. So some people may get frightened about this. You should mention that. And please also remember, sometimes the urine color is so dark, it can make their clothes dark colored. It is such a dense color. So that you should please always warn all these patients. Hai na? Yes. So other. Yes. Please, Rupa.
Yes. So just as Sir has very lucidly led the discussion. So the first important thing here would be to clarify what the patient means when he says no effect. So for that, patient and caregiver education is very important. As we just discussed, this no effect could be a wearing off, which is deterioration. It could be a delayed on. It could be a partial on, means on is there, but the benefit is not as much as he was attaining previously. It could be an unpredictable off, a sudden off or a random off. It could be a dose failure, that it fails to turn on at all after taking a dose. They could also have on-off fluctuations, which could be like what we call yo-yo fluctuations, suddenly turning on, off after one dose. They could have early morning offs or nocturnal offs or nocturnal akinesia. So we have to educate the patient to identify this and tell you correctly so that we are able to manage it effectively. Sometimes asking them to maintain this is called a PD diary, Hauser diary. So Hauser diary would help you and the patient understand what exactly. So our patient clarifies that with each dose, the medication effect lasts about 4 hours. He is experiencing right upper limb more than left upper limb rest tremor, slowness and stiffness of all 4 limbs, and slow gait for about 1 hour prior to the next dose. He is still independent during this time. So how will you manage this problem? So we have discussed the strategies as we discussed. That would depend again on what is the exact problem that we identify. If it is a wearing off, as we just discussed, we can increase the number of levodopa immediate release doses. We can consider controlled release. As Sir rightly pointed out, controlled release doesn't really increase the off time or total off time. It may only reduce the number of doses that you have to take. Or now, an extended release levodopa is available in the US and other markets, not yet available in India. We can also add on a non-levodopa drug, like a dopamine agonist, for example. If it is a delayed on, as rightly pointed out, we ensure that the intake is at least 1 hour away from the meals. We can ask the patient to crush and chew and take it along with some acidic liquid like lime juice or soda, or increase.
Dr. Rupa, this is a very interesting point. Delayed on is usually not an early feature. It usually comes after many, many years.
Yes,
and usually this is a problem in the first morning dose.
Yes.
In the daytime, because they already have a drug. And you wonderfully mentioned that, and everybody should curiously know this. So sometimes we can ask that whatever drug you are taking, you can take half tablet of, I'm trying to use a brand name, it is not to promote anybody, Syndopa plus half tablet, dissolve it into half a cup of water and drink it just now. So the effect will come within 5 to 10 minutes. That is in the patient who find in the morning, they find difficulty in having on. So they can kickstart the drug like this, and then they can continue the rest of the drug. But we must also mention that some people have morning benefit. Morning benefit, when they get up in the morning, they say, for first 1 hour, I can do it without the drug. And this is present in almost 20 to 30% of the patient. If you have the advantage of having this morning benefit, then usually I may not give my first dose at 6 o'clock. I may delay it by an hour. Because he is telling you that I can do it without drug, then by this time, and don't medicate at that period of time. Second thing was nocturnal off, Dr. Rupa just mentioned. So for nocturnal, so are you coming with this point here? Nocturnal off?
I'll just okay. So please go ahead.
Yeah. So she's mentioning. Chalo, then you continue. I think you already have this point. Okay.
So then
please continue.
Yeah. So if we have so if it is a partial on, that means the on is not as much as that he was achieving previously, then you have to increase the individual levodopa dose, or you can again add on a non-levodopa drug. For an unpredictable off or random off. So these were difficult to manage previously, but now in the last few years, we have had some good options coming in for these patients with apomorphine subcutaneous or even sublingual apomorphine and oral inhalational levodopa, which can be used SOS. And early morning off, as Sir rightly pointed out, many patients report a morning benefit, but some patients may have a severe early morning off, in which case a nocturnal CR or an extended release levodopa, if it is available, may help the previous night. And you can also add on a non-levodopa drug or apomorphine subcutaneous SOS instead of the first dose. You can bridge that gap from the morning till your first dose of levodopa kicks in. And then nocturnal off, as Sir discussed, this is probably the place where levodopa controlled release may have a benefit in some patients to tide over the early part of the night. If it doesn't help, we may advise patients to take immediate release levodopa SOS. And for dose failures, if it doesn't turn on after 1.5 hours, they can always repeat a dose again, crushing and chewing it with maybe soda or lime juice, so that increases the absorption. And if you have on-off fluctuations, you may need to use a combination of these strategies. And if these that I have marked with the $sign are not currently available in India, the others are options that we can right now offer our patients. After all these combinations, many patients reach a stage where the quality of life is not successfully maintained by any of these, and then it is time to think about other options like deep brain stimulation or continuous subcutaneous apomorphine infusion, subcutaneous infusions, or levodopa interval gel. So our patient has a mild.
I have one point. Somebody says I am taking one tablet of Syndopa CR at bedtime at 11 o'clock. And when I get up in the morning, I'm completely rigid. How do I handle this problem?
Dr. Satish, would you like to answer?
Sir, yes, ma'am. Sir, it's again, one is if he's going, we can either delay that night dose, or if it is not work, we would take it off.
Then he's taking at 11 o'clock. I say I sleep at 11.
Yes, sir. If the nocturnal akinesia part is not very severe, which is really hampering his sleep, then I would take it off. And for the early morning akinesia part,
sleep is fine. When I get up in the morning, I'm so stiff I can't get out of the bed.
So immediately before he gets out of the bed on arising, he will take a small dose of either levodopa or dopagonist. That will be the strategies.
Okay, good strategy.
Sir,
but I have
please
think that.
5 more minutes left for this case.
5 more
Thank
minutes.
you.
So answer to this question is, these are the people who also get up multiple times in the night. So I educate them, whenever you get up in the night at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, take one more tablet of Syndopa CR. So by the time you get up in the morning, you have some effect and you will not be completely rigid. So now we are giving Syndopa CR twice in the night rather than only once in the night.
Right.
So that is another strategy to handle early morning severe stiffness. Dr. Rupa, please continue.
So the options in our patient, being a young patient with early wearing off, would be to either increase the levodopa, either the number of immediate release or doses, or convert it into or CR or ER if it is available, or add a non-levodopa and dopaminergic drugs. So I will just rush through these. So longer acting levodopa preparations, CR, as we discussed, it doesn't actually add to the off time, it doesn't actually increase the duration of on time. It will only reduce the number of doses, and it is helpful for nocturnal akinesia. Extended release is a combination, is a capsule that contains one immediate release, different types of extended release beads, and one active excipient, which is tartaric acid, to facilitate enteral absorption. This is right now not available in India, but it is again a way to bridge. It's an option for patients with motor fluctuations. These are the other drugs that you can use as adjuncts to levodopa monotherapy: dopamine agonists, COMT inhibitors, MOAB inhibitors, amantadine, estradiol, and zonisamide are used predominantly in Japan and not so much outside of Japan. And then when these don't for a good enough quality of life, we can think about device assisted therapies. So I will not go into the individual of these drugs, just to briefly show you that all of these drugs that we discussed, dopamine agonists, rasagiline, selegiline, if you add them on, if you see, the benefit that you give to the patient is about 1.5 hours of added on time in a day without dyskinesias, and it reduces again off time by about 1.5 hours. So that is the benefit at maximal therapeutic doses that you can offer to the patient. Choosing among the strategies will depend on factors like the patient's disability, the current duration of off time during his awake hours, the age of the patient, the presence and severity of dyskinesias, and also the non-motor symptom profile, the anticipated side effect profile, as we discussed with dopamine agonist, ICD, or hallucinations in an elderly patient. You may not want to use that. And of course, financial considerations. So overall, based on this, you have to make an individual choice in an individual patient, whether you would like to increase the levodopa or add on a non-levodopa adjunct. And the broad aim would always be to give the minimum total levodopa equivalent daily doses of drugs to provide control of disabling symptoms and an acceptable quality of life, not to 100% control all the symptoms. So just to take it a little bit further, so this patient, because he was young and was having early motor wearing off, he was offered an adjunct add-on, was pramipexole, 4.5 milligrams per day. And then gradually levodopa needed to be increased over the next 1.5 years to 4 times in a day. And now he reports abnormal involuntary movements in the right upper and lower limb after taking levodopa. How will you approach this new problem?
Ma'am, he's developing dyskinesias on levodopa. So, I mean, with the current dopaminergic treatment, options will be either to increase the making the dopaminergic agonistic therapy as a mainstay of treatment and reduce the levodopa carbidopa. That is one strategy. But as pramipexole is already taking 4.5 mg, so we cannot increase it further. So
what else?
We can add amantadine. One option is that amantadine.
What else?
Dyskinesias.
What else? What else can you do if you don't want to increase the cost of the drug?
The patient is already taking 4 tablets of levodopa carbidopa. We can distribute that, like make it 6 times the same dose, or we can
exactly, perfectly right. You can make it 3/4 of a tablet and make it 5 or 6 times a day. So you will have same amount of levodopa, but it's spread over the period of time. So you will not have dyskinesia. So just by reducing the individual dose and make it more frequent, you will be able to take care of the symptoms. But if in this case, if the patient does not tolerate this, then that's the time we need to add an amantadine, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So just as we discussed with the motor fluctuations, now this is now important to educate the patient to ask for the timing and the type of dyskinesia so that we can understand whether this is a peak dose dyskinesia, a square wave dyskinesia, a beginning of dose or end of dose, or a diphasic dyskinesia, or is this actually an off-period dystonia? So the phenomenology, briefly, the peak wave and square wave dyskinesias are usually more coriform and maybe ballistic and generally involve the trunk and the limbs. Whereas the diphasic and end of dose, those dystonias are usually more, those dyskinesias are more dystonic and maybe painful. And off dystonias typically occur early morning and maybe typically are in the foot. Okay, so these strategies were just discussed, as Sir has rightly said. Peak dose dyskinesias, you can reduce the individual levodopa, fraction the dose, or sometimes you can reduce the levodopa and, if feasible, add a long-acting dopaminergic medication. Those strategies are mentioned here. So, but it is important what is the exact problem before we make any changes to the regimen. And for off-related dystonias, especially now, apomorphine again is now showing good benefit, especially for early morning off dystonias. So amantadine, we discussed that this is the only drug which has been consistently shown to improve dyskinesias without worsening Parkinsonism in clinical trials. So it's a very valuable drug for us. So this is my last question to you. So after 4 years, we managed that patient, and now 4 years later, he reports delayed on duration 2 hours, moderately disabling peak dose dyskinesias, a cumulative off time of 4 hours in a day, 10% of doses are resulting in failure, and now he needs help to get up and off. He's on levodopa, carbidopa, immediate release, extended release, controlled release, entacapone, pramipexole, and amantadine. He has been counseled about ST and DBS, but at present he's not willing for surgery. So what additional management can be offered?
Ma'am, either a levodopa, if it is available, levodopa, carbidopa intestinal gel or subcutaneous apomorphine infusion can be offered, or a more conventional strategy can be the total dose of levodopa can be mixed in a 1 liter bottle and with ascorbic acid, and the patient can sip the liquid as required depending on the requirement. But that should be monitored and it should be taken care that they should not abuse the
this liquid form of levodopa is always mentioned and taught, but let me tell you there are problems with this. What is the problem? When you, if you dissolve this, even with vitamin C or soda or whatever it is, the solution does not remain uniform. One thing. Second thing, every time you take a sip from your bottle, you are not measuring the amount of fluid that goes into your mouth. So every sip is different until unless somebody is so meticulously measuring into a measuring glass and drinking it every timely. Third thing is, when you drink this liquid, there is an immediate effect, and then it goes down. So it's a peak and effect. So that's another problem. So effect will come very fast and effect will go very fast. So either you will, I will have you to time it yourself. Every 35 minutes, I'll drink one sip, and my sip will be exactly measured. So, and every time if you look at the solution, the drug will settle down. So every time you have to shake it well before you drink it. So this is very cumbersome issue. If this would have been such a simple issue, then we would not have created a gel, which is. Do you know how much is the approximate cost of the gel if you use in India? It is something like 2 to 3 lakh rupees per month, except surgery and everything. So it's only dose costing is 2 to 3 lakh rupees per month. That's why it's never been launched in India. So this liquid solution I only use when they early morning, late on. So I said crush out half tablet in liquid and drink it. So which is fine. I have patients who have been drinking this entire day, carry a bottle, and every half an hour they shake the bottle and drink a sip, shake the bottle and drink a sip, which is, I think, a very cumbersome phenomena. Second, what is the second option, Dr. Raga?
Subcutaneous apomorphine infusion, but that is also not very cheap.
No, there are two things. See, apomorphine comes in two forms. One is the stat injection, like the way you give insulin. So so I'm sure you must have seen when you used to titrate in the ward that how to give apomorphine. So you start from 1 milligram of apomorphine subcutaneously, and previously it was said you re-inject after 45 minutes to 1 hour. But now there is a new guideline, you can do it every half an hour. If you get one effect, you call the patient off the drug in the morning. You give 1 milligram apomorphine, wait for half an hour, then give 2 milligram, and you re-titrate and find out what is the optimal dose on which the patient is responding. So, for example, like Dr. Rupa mentioned, the patient goes off 4 times a day. So every time you go off, you take a prick and that amount of dose, and you will take care of it. Other is if the patient has to take more than 3 or 4 injections, the best would be to have an infusion. So which is again a subcutaneous infusion. You connect with the pump and you calculate the total dose and goes over the period of time. So that is another way of rescuing in this situation where the patients are going off.
Yes.
Especially if the patient is not willing for DBS surgery.
Yes. So that is the point that I wanted to just bring up, that right now this is another option that we could offer our patients, continuous subcutaneous apomorphine infusion. So this is the randomized control trial after which of PRCT of continuous subcutaneous apomorphine infusion, Toledo. This randomized 107 patients to receive a dose of about 4.6 milligrams per hour of apomorphine, and showed that there is significant reduction in off time, about 2 hours, near 2 hours in favor of apomorphine over placebo. But apart from the reduction in off time, this study did not show an improvement in quality of life. And in the long term, the studies are not available, and there are issues related to infusion site skin changes and so we really don't know about the long term compared to, for example, if you look at the body of evidence for DBS and compare it to, this is a newer and emerging therapy. But definitely this has place as part of our armamentarium against PD. Especially, it can be offered as part of the best medical therapy for otherwise candidates for DBS, but desire a lesser invasive therapy for the time being. As I just said, evidence base is limited as compared to DBS, and long-term outcomes and effect on QOL need to be studied further. Right, so I just wanted to walk you through the journey of a PD patient. If you treat them over the period of years, this is how they will come to you, and this is how we make decisions jointly with the patient. So the take home is that about 90% of PD patients develop motor fluctuations and dyskinesias after 10 years of illness. Multiple options are there for medical management in the medium term. The choice of strategy has to be individualized depending on the disabling motor and non-motor symptoms, and especially financial considerations. Consider deep brain stimulation or other device-assisted therapies when the quality of life remains impaired despite best medical therapy. And these are some articles that are useful for further reading if you would like to explore this topic further. Thank you.
Wonderful case.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an interesting case and interactive session. Ma'am, would you like to take up two questions and also Vinay, sir? We have two questions from the audience.
Oh, good.
One
So
is
there are no
from
more.
Dr.
There were no more case discussion, na? Good,
Sir,
good.
after this, there is
Yes.
one more case discussion, sir, by Dr. Ritu Shri, ma'am, sir.
Okay.
The
So who's
first
taking
question is
questions?
Dr.
Yeah.
Sir, you can take up, sir, and Rupa ma'am also.
No. You can read out questions.
Yes, sir. Dr. Srujana from Delhi is asking, can we prefer safinamide instead of entacapone in patients with wearing off effect?
Safinamide is a MAO-B inhibitor, whereas entacapone is a COMT inhibitor. So there are two different pathways. And most of the patients, MAO-B inhibitors are practically one of the first drug to be used as a Parkinson's disease. So most of the patients who are on anti-Parkinson drug will be on some or other MAO-B inhibitors. If you want to use safinamide, then you will have to stop a previous MAO-B inhibitor at least 1 month before you start safinamide, and then you have to retitrate. You can go up to 200 milligram per day. So it is available in the doses of 50 milligram tablet. You can give it twice a day, so 50 milligram twice a day, and go up to 200 milligram per day. So like we have resergiline and selegiline, the safinamide is also not a magic drug. You don't see an effect like you give a levodopa or you give amantadine. The effect is not as strong. But given a choice, if you want, I was involved in safinamide trial, which was BTS-PD trial, which started in 2004. And the multiple number of trials lasted for 10 years, early PD, middle PD, late PD, PD with dyskinesia, 25 milligram, 200 milligram. So I think this is one of the longest studied molecule, and now we are using for last 2-3 years. I'm
Yes.
not a die-hard fan of safinamide. I'm
And
sure
it is one of
my
the,
other...
sorry to disturb you, because one of the studies
Yeah, tell me.
largest number of patients also compared to other
Yeah.
about 600,
Because,
700.
because they did so much of study. And let me tell you, for the younger students who are studying, when this study was done, it was a global study to enroll, I think, 600 patients. And then every country was given a target, and India was supposed to enroll some 60 to 100 patients. But India ended up enrolling more than 1/3 of the cases because it was a global competitive study. And India had enrolled one of the largest number of patients in this study. That's how India became famous for doing large number of studies, especially in Parkinson's disease. What is the next question?
Sir, the other question is from Dr. Ghosh from Durgapur. Regarding the same case, he is asking for the role of the rotigotine patch.
Okay. So let me tell you the story of rotigotine patch. I would not like to say the company which is trying to market. This company had done trial twice. I think for last 10 years they are not doing any more trials. The problem with the patch is in India, keeping in mind it's a hot and humid environment, and most of the people will sweat. Whenever this patch was tried, there were two problems. The patch, they were not able to stick the patch for a longer period of time, so it would get off. Second problem, though, because of the wet and humid environment, the patch was not stable. So they could not do this study in India, so it was never launched in India. Whenever I have used rotigotine patches, they have been bringing smuggled drug, and it is a good drug. I have used this, but currently, let me tell you, if you look at the rotigotine patch trial, the minimum effective drug was 13.5 to 18 milligram per day. And let me tell you, the 2 milligram patch in India in black market causes 500 rupees. So most of the time, it is a placebo effect when you are using, either you use 2 milligram patch or 4 milligram patch. I have never used more than 4 milligram patch because I'm sure most of the people can't afford it. So for me, it's like wearing an expensive jewelry, which may be useless. So if those who have a lot of money, they say, I want to use rotigotine patch, I'll get it from America and I'll get it from USA. So then I prescribe them, so they're happy using it. But I'm not very fond of this drug. And that's my limited experience with this drug.
Thank you for solving the query, sir. I think we can move on to the third case, sir.
Right.
And unfortunately, Professor Prasad sir is unable to join today's session. Sir is out of station and sir is having a poor network.
Okay. So we have more time?
We have more time, sir.
So we can go up to 12 o'clock in the night. Continue.
So we have half an hour.
We have 30 minutes, sir. It's 8:30 now, sir. Approx.
See, you'll have to stop me. So tell me that's good enough for today. So
Yes,
I'll
sir.
stop then.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So who's presenting the next case?
Dr. Ritu ma'am will be presenting the next case, sir.
Okay.
Ma'am, you can
Hello,
share
Ritu.
your slides.
Good evening, sir. I'll be presenting the next case. I'll share my screen.
You're Dr. Ritu, you joined PGI?
Yes, sir. I've joined PGI, sir.
Oh, when did you join? You were in Rishikesh, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, sir. I was in
Yeah,
Rishikesh.
yeah.
I joined last year in August, sir. Here.
I hope you remember me when we met
Yes,
last time.
sir. I do. How can I forget
Continue.
you? So how can anybody forget?
I know. Okay, continue.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm going to discuss.
Your slide, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Ritu, now it's full slide.
My
Continue.
slides are visible, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to discuss impulse control disorders and Parkinson's disease. Actually, I'm also new to the topic and I don't have much experience on the topic. And I think the discussion with senior residents and Vinay Goyal sir and Sahil sir and Rupa ma'am will add on to my slides. So moving on further. My slides are visible?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So moving on further with the first case. So we have a 54-year-old female who had history of 6 years of classic Parkinson's disease. Initially started with bradykinesia and rest tremors on the left side, followed by right side. She was started on levodopa carbidopa combination initially, and then it was gradually increased to 5. Later on, one more drug was added, and it was increased in doses. And after that, after some time of adding the second drug, she started shopping excessively in stores and online. She also bought lottery tickets, and her husband was very concerned about it. And she could not focus on anything else. And she felt embarrassed about it, but could not stop. On examination, she was mildly bradykinetic, without tremors or rigidity, and had mild to moderate dyskinesia. So the question for residents is that which is the most commonly responsible drug implicated for a recent symptom? Is it racegiline?
Ropinirole.
Yes, it is ropinirole.
So I'll make the I will make the question little complicated because I know this is a very simple question
Yes.
and all the students on the panel will answer it.
Yes.
So my question here, answer remains same, the options remain same. Which is the first drug from which impulse control disorder was described?
Amphetamine and cocaine, sir.
No, amphetamine is not available here. There are only 4 options. Radha is a smart answer. It's not science.
Levodopa.
Levodopa. 1956, hypersexuality was reported, one of the earliest impulse control disorder with levodopa. Chalo, continue.
And it was initially reported with amphetamines apart from PD. So
Yes.
So moving further to next case, a 58-year-old female who has IPD for last 4 years, otherwise stable on medication that she was taking Pramipexole with HNY of 2, came for follow. Her daughter-in-law mentioned that she spends most of her time at home arranging clothes. Even when they have been assembled, she will take them out of the almirah and rearrange. She does the same thing with utensils in the kitchen, and when she is interrupted, she will feel irritated and distressed. So what is the term used to describe her current symptoms?
Funding.
Okay. Yes, I kept the questions easy because
Yeah. No, don't worry. I will make it.
a very
I will
good thing
make them
that the students are answering.
I'll make it complicated. Don't worry.
Yes, sir.
So somebody who is in funding, what drug you would like to give to treat funding?
Sir, first
Other
thing
than
is
going
whether
to
funding
Dubai.
is whether that funding is actually disturbing or whether it is not disturbing.
No.
If it
So
is,
we want to treat. So we want to treat this funding a patient with we have trying to withdraw dopa agonist which drug has been tried to treat burning?
Amantadine.
Oh, wonderful. When did you read this? I'm impressed.
It was a small trial, sir. About 13 patients were included in this trial.
Yes.
But
Oh,
there was
wonderful.
lots of
Very
withdrawal
impressive, very impressive.
because of the side effects of.
Yes. Amantadine has been tried in punting. Fine. So here, when there is a question of impulse control disorder, and we have time, I must tell you a very interesting case. This is a gentleman who was in their early 60s, Parkinson's disease for almost 10 years. He was on a very high dose of pramipexole and very regular follow-up, very obedient patient of mine. In between, he started coming to my OPD and tell me, sir, do you have a patient who is poor and who can buy medicine, and I want to buy medicines for these patients. So every second, third OPD he would come. So I would identify this. He was Mr. Soni. He was such a dear patient. And say, Mr. Soni, this is the gentleman who is poor and you can help him. So he'll go to the market, bring medicine for him, and give it to him. I started noticing that he was becoming extremely helpful to these patients. Then one day he bought a very small gift, a pen for me. I said, you don't have to give me. And then he started bringing all, small gifts for me, which was little amazing for me. But maybe he's trying to make a rapport with me too, because he's trying to help the patients. And then one day his son came to me and said, sir, I have to talk to you. I said, okay, come down to my office. And then he tells me a story. This gentleman is now on a buying spree. He asked me, please ask him how much money does he have in his pocket right now. And Mr. Soni said he has 50,000 rupees in his pocket. I said, why you should carry 50,000 rupees? Well, I may need it suddenly to buy something or help somebody. So he started keeping so much of money. Whenever he would go to the market, in recent times, he had brought 6 kurtas of same design and different color. Bought 2 pairs of shoes, bought 2 expensive watches. Son came to me when he bought a car when it was not required. So he started helping his daughter who had some social problems. He was helping him excessively. Then son said, I don't mind if he's helping my sister, but this is beyond the protocol and he's spending too much of money. This is a small part of this. So it was like, gambling, or you become shopaholic. Problem came when he started having behavior issues. He would get up in the middle of the night, go to the kitchen, and he started eating. And he put on a lot of weight. If you were to stop, he would suddenly become very angry. He put up all his financial paper of the house, put them in the middle of the house, and burnt them off. One day at 11 o'clock, his son gives me a frantic call, but did Papa come to your clinic? I say, no. What's wrong? Well, he has left the mobile and he's not at home. Suddenly, in a fit of rage, he has left home. And by evening, 10 o'clock, we learned that he has reached Haridwar, where he had a house. The neighbor informed him. So his behavior had become erratic. And then we realized that he is on high dose of pramipexole. We stopped pramipexole and then he recovered very well. So sometimes these impulse control disorders become so severe. I must also mention, we should always ask spouse about hypersexuality, because some of the elderly couple have come and told me, the spouse has told me horrifying stories of drug-related hypersexuality, and it was rather very difficult or shameful for the spouse to describe what they have been doing, and say I would commit suicide rather than staying with my spouse. It was so embarrassing for them. So we should always ask these people about these questions, because they never come and tell you. So if we ask gently, are there any issues like this, then spouse might disclose some of the symptoms. Yes, let's go to the next question.
Yes, usually patient would not report, but the family members would report the symptoms.
Yes.
So the next case is about hypersexual disorder only. As Sahil sir also mentioned in the discussion with Drupa ma'am, the same case, that 60-year-old, he was a farmer. not formally educated, and he was stable for the last 5 years when the son came for one follow-up, and he said that he had recently developed abnormal sexual behavior in the form of sexual acts towards the cows at home. So he was very ashamed of telling, but he was told to mention that maybe it is related to the illness which he is having. So after that, we decreased pramipexole, and then he has improvement in his symptoms.
Yes, wonderful.
So moving further, about
So what are the common impulse control disorders in India?
Hypersexuality, binge eating.
Compulsive.
Binge eating is one of the commonest. I think I don't remember the data from our papers. Ashish Sharma had done his impulse control disorder paper. You can read, I don't know which journal, I think in Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology. We published some 7-8 years ago. Yes, continue.
Impulse control disorders are class of psychiatric disorders characterized by impulsivity. That is an urge or impulse, and there will be a failure to resist the temptation. It is not very uncommon, though underreported, and because it is poorly understood by the general public, patient, as well as the clinicians. The impulse control disorders are usually reward-driven activities with three key components: presence of impulsive aspect, that is lack of forethought and consideration of consequences. There will be presence of compulsive aspect, there will be repetitive behaviors with the lack of self-control, and there will be negative or harmful behavior to oneself or to the others. So what is the least commonly reported impulse control disorder all over the world or India? What do you think?
Actually, this will be a different question because if I give an example, in Japan, the commonest impulse control disorder is gambling.
Yes, sir.
Because if somebody has gone to the Japan, if you get out of the Tokyo station, first thing you notice outside Tokyo station is a lot of slot machines, gambling machines. And they are like every railway station has a lot of restaurants in India. So there are more gambling machines outside railway station than restaurant. So it's, I think, society driven.
Yes.
Some of the society where gambling will be more common. But I think, like Dr. Radha mentioned correctly, I think binge eating is very common among Indian patients, to my mind.
So the least commonly reported is the hoarding among all the mentioned impulse control disorder in these. Moving further, if you look at the history of impulse control disorder, these are commonly reported in the last 2 decades after the introduction of newer and greater D3 receptor affinity dopamine agonist drugs. And the initial reports were regarding pathological gambling as well as regarding compulsive medication use, which was also known as hedonic hemostatic dysregulation, or we know by the name of dopamine dysregulation syndrome.
Dysregulation, DDS.
Yes, sir. And then further, the reports came about compulsive buying, compulsive eating, and sexual behaviors associated with patients of PD on dopamine agonists. The 4 most common impulse control disorders reported are pathological gambling, compulsive buying, as sir told, binge eating, and hypersexual disorders. There are other ICD-related disorders which are also being reported with dopamine replacement therapy, which is dopamine dysregulation syndrome, which is more common with high potency dopamine drugs, punding, hobbyism, hoarding, and walkabouts. So taking one by one, pathological gambling.
Are you going to talk about DDS?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Good.
Yes,
carry on.
Yes. Pathological gambling is inappropriate, recurrent, and persistent maladaptive gambling activity that adversely affect family, personal, and professional life. It is more commonly seen in male PD patients, and the prevalence is variable. It is more seen in more reported from the Western countries, as sir has already said that it has ICD has social as well as cultural variations, and the prevalence reported has been 4 to 8%. Hypersexual disorders is also commonly reported from the male populations of PD, and the patients are usually preoccupied by sexual thoughts, internet pornography, changes in sexual preferences, as mentioned, zoophilia and paraphilia. On patients on dopamine agonist therapy, the prevalence has been found to be approximately 4%, and the patient with Parkinson's without dopamine agonist, the prevalence has been found to be around 2%. Binge eating is characterized by episodes of recurrent binge eating in the absence of maladaptive compensatory behavior. There will be a sense of lack of control over eating during the episodes, and the patient will take food in a discrete period of time, very frequently, maybe within 2 hours of period, and the patient will take amount of food that is much more larger than most people will eat in a similar period of time under normal circumstances. It is most commonly seen in female population. Compulsive buying is repetitive loss. There will be repetitive loss of control over spending money, and the patient gets a negative emotional state when there is no buying, and if the patient family members resist them for buying, and it is more commonly reported from female population. The dopamine dysregulation syndrome is a drug addiction-like state, and it is characterized by compulsive and excessive desire for use of abnormally high dose of dopamine replacement therapy, even if the symptoms are of lesser severity. It is much higher for high potency and short-acting dopaminergic drugs like levodopa and apomorphine, and the patient usually complain of dysphoria and anxiety if there is aggressive demand and the demand is not met. The patient can develop withdrawal symptoms. The patients with early onset PD, male patients usually have more DDS, and we can get history of mood disorders and family history of psychiatric disorders with patients with DDS. Funding is...
Sorry, I'm interrupting. Please go back to DDS. I wanted to discuss DDS because DDS is actually a common problem, but it doesn't get recognized. What is the common presentation when you see a patient who is sitting in front of you, is constantly moving, so he has subtle dyskinesia, and he will come and tell you, डॉक्टर साहब मेरे को तो इफेक्ट ही नहीं आ रहा है, मेरे को तो दवा बढ़ाना पड़ता है, मेरे को बार-बार दवा खाना पड़ता है. These are the patients who are taking levodopa SOS. Whereas if you prescribe 4 tablets, you'll be taking 10 tablets. And in spite of having dyskinesia, he will come and tell you that he is not having the effect. So there is a wonderful criteria for DDS. One of the criteria is patient already has an existing more effect of the drug. There is a constant demand of requiring more drug, in spite of the fact that they are developing side effect of the drug. So it's a more of a demand. So that's a dopamine. It's a dysregulation. It's not about the dopamine deficiency syndrome. It is dysregulation because already there is a drug effect and causing dyskinesia, and still the patient demands it more. So it has to be recognized. Otherwise, they keep on increasing the drug. And I must mention there is a very interesting patient. This patient would keep levodopa in his pocket. So wherever he will feel even a little of discomfort, he will lick the tablet in the mouth, and then he will. So when you do it sublingually, it's like sublingual. So he'll get an effect within 5 minutes, and then he will keep the tablet in the morning. So entire day he would be dyskinetic. Whenever the dyskinesia will go a little down, he will lick the tablet again, and that's how it was. In spite of doing a DBS, he continued to have severe dyskinesia, and he would do it in spite of the fact he was asked to stop levodopa. Please go ahead.
Yes. Funding is repetitive, purposeless, prolonged, and stereotype movement. The patient usually have compulsive fascination as repetitive mechanical tasks, such as patient will collect household objects, arrange them as perfectly as possible. They will arrange and disarrange. This is a photograph showing funding, like how the patient have arranged it in a sequence, in a line, and the movement is purposeless. The act is purposeless, actually. So despite being purposeless, the patient feels comfort on doing such activities, and patient frustrated if diverted, or the patient could not complete the task. Hobbism is repetitive and excessive complex motor activities, like some higher order activities like writing, gardening, collecting, use of internet, etc. And hoarding is acquisition of or failure to discard a large number of items with no objective value. And it usually results in inhabitable condition for family members. Patient will keep the item which are not even useful in their room, under their bed or under the mattress, and they will keep on accumulating items. And there have been reports with hoarding of levodopa and dopamine agonists by the patient. In walkabouts, the patient will have restlessness leading to aimless and excessive wandering, either walking or driving. So coming on to prevalence of impulse control behaviors, in general population it is 0.2 to approximately up to 5.6%, and it is not clear whether de novo PD patient in itself is a risk factor for development of ICD. It itself is a debatable topic, but when we see the prevalence reported in PD patients, the impulse control behavior, this is a slide showing almost all the case reported. There are 2 studies from India also, and you can see that the prevalence have been reported from 13.6% to around 68% from the study from the Italy. And the largest study reported was from United States and Canadian population, and they have taken almost more than 3,000 patients. The most
This
common...
was Dunlop study. What was the study? 3090.
Sir, it was Dominion, sir.
Domino study. Dominion study.
Yes, sir.
This Sharma A was AIM study.
Yes, sir. Sharma A was AIM study, sir. And Sharat et al. Study was from Sri Chitra Institute by Dr. Asha Tishu.
When this was published? It was published later on because there was no study before us.
Sir, it was published later on, sir. 2000
Yes,
and I
good.
think 2010.
Yes.
And the most common impulse control behavior we can see here was either dopamine dysregulation syndrome or hypersexuality or funding. These were the 3 most commonly reported impulse control behavior disorder. I would like to discuss the study by Ventrop et al., which is commonly known as Dominant study. And it was a cross-sectional study, and they took almost more than 3,000 people. And the population was from United States and Canada. And they reported incidence of 13.6% of ICD in their patients. And around 3.9% of patients had 2 or more ICD. The most common ICB reported was compulsive buying and pathological gambling. And around 37% of their patients were not receiving levodopa. And almost all patients had some dopamine replacement.
Gentle reminder regarding the time, ma'am. I think we can wind up and like in 2 minutes and take 2 questions.
Okay, I'll go on to management then. So I just wanted to say that when we compare ICD in patients with dopamine versus no dopamine agonist therapy, there is statistically significant difference. And also, when we compare patients with dopamine agonists versus levodopa, the incidence of ICD is more commonly seen with dopamine agonists. However, when we see the subtype of dopamine agonist type, there is no difference between the subtypes of dopamine agonists. The dose effect in this study, they did not find any difference between the dopamine agonist dose in ICD and non-ICD patients. However, they found that there was some association with the higher levodopa doses. So, Indian scenario, I think I would skip it. It has the same scenario. The risk factors are, sir has already told, the geographical area. Young age has more propensity to develop. Male gender have hypersexuality and gambling disorder more commonly found. Female gender buying and eating disorders. history of psychiatric disorders, smoking, alcohol is definitely associated with ICD. And the studies has also reported there is some genetic factors which is coming into play, and so the family history is very important when we start the
that is,
patient
I think that is the most important factor.
Yes.
You always, if you have a history of any psychiatric illness in the family, they have higher risk of developing impulse control disorders.
Yes. So I'll skip the pathophysiology. This most important screening tool used is QIP and QIP rating scale. Moving on to the management, I have a question. Shall I take the question, sir?
Yes. Ask the organizer if we have a time.
Yes,
Shall I
ma'am.
take the question?
Yes, ma'am. You can take up this.
Okay. What will be the first step in managing the patients of PD with compulsive buying or funding if you get the patient?
Increasing the
They have to decrease the dose of dopamine agonist.
dopamine agonist should be decreased.
I think 2 is the answer.
Yes.
Hello. Next.
Yes, sir. Because if levodopa should be increased only and only when it is needed. So you have to ask the patient what level of disability the patient is having. So in management, you have to assess the disability. You have to discuss with the patient and family. You have to initially reduce the dose, and if possible, you have to discontinue the use of dopamine agonist, and if possible, use a longer acting formulation as it has the lesser risk as compared to the shorter risk. Amantadine has yes.
Please don't stop dopa agonist suddenly. That's very important.
Yes.
Yes.
It should be stopped gradually. Amantadine has a controversial role. Some studies have shown, some studies like this randomized control crossover study has supported the effect, which has compared with the placebo drug, and they have marked decrease in the scoring of ICD. However, some studies have reported that amantadine has resulted in more hypersexuality and pathological gambling. Emerging therapies, I would just take 1 minute. Emerging therapies, apomorphine, intrajejunal levodopa infusion, and deep brain stimulation. The role is controversial. However, there are 2 studies reported. This one is from UK. They did a 3 years prospective study of 41 patients of apomorphine and 19 patients on intrajejunal levodopa infusion. And what they found that all the patients who were on intrajejunal levodopa infusion, all of them has decreased in either decrease or stopping of ICDs after they were shifted to intrajejunal levodopa infusion, and no patient has new troublesome ICD. However, the group on apomorphine infusion, 4 patients has developed new troublesome ICDs. The next study was a multi-center study, and they have also found that the patient who were on intrajejunal levodopa infusion, they have more better improvement. No new cases of ICD was observed. However, the patient on apomorphine infusion, there were some new cases, but none of them required discontinuation of apomorphine. However, we need more bigger studies, as both the studies has very few number of cases, and we need randomized control study for further data. There have been many studies of impact of DBS and impulse control behavior disorders. Some support the roles, some are against the role. The role is almost currently controversial. So there are controversial roles of all these drugs. So I'll come to take home message slide. The ICD is uncommon but can be disabling. Prevalence differ as per culture, gender, demographic, and possibly genetic risk factor. There must be a counseling at initiation of the drugs. Treatment strategies are limited, and discontinuing an efficacious drug is the mainstay of treatment, but can be sometimes very unsatisfactory for the patient and the family. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the interesting case and elaborative discussion. And I hope this is an engaging, interactive session, and it's very thought-provoking for all the residents. Sir, there is one question from the audience.
Yes.
Question is to Dr. Vinay sir and Dr. Rupa ma'am. From Dr. Ajay Kumar Vats from Udaipur. Bupropion, is it a good choice as an antidepressant?
I personally, I don't use this drug very often, so my experience of using this drug is limited. Dr. Rupa?
Yes, sir.
Do
I
you
think
use
I agree
Bupropion?
with you there. And although I
Yes.
think because of its dopamine reuptake inhibition mechanism of action, pathophysiologically it was postulated to be a good drug, but there is not much evidence. Only
Yes.
studies and which did not show much efficacy. So there is not much evidence.
If you look at the evidence, the large number of antidepressant drugs which have been tried in Parkinson as a depression, in patients with Parkinson, none of the drug has shown efficacy actually. That's the problem. So all time the drug like fluoxetine is one drug people end up using because that may be one of the safer drug to choice. But in practice, in generally we use escitalopram left and right, and I've used even up to 40 milligram per day. So I think if you ask me experience based use, then I would still use escitalopram because of the your user friendliness. Yes.
Sir, just one more question, sir, from our residents regarding the tapering schedule for the dopamine agonist. Is it like 4 mg per day or 24 mg per day for rock and roll in case of impulsive disorder?
So point is how slow you should reduce. I think there is no mathematical calculation, but it seems like reducing over a period of few weeks is not a bad idea unless there is an emergency that somebody is having a very bad symptom. For example, somebody is on 20 milligram of propirenol. I don't mind making it 10 milligram per day and then reduce it slowly rather than stopping it. But stopping a dopa agonist suddenly can sometimes lead to severe condition and neuroleptic malignant syndrome, which none of us want. Any more questions?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I thank all the moderators and speakers and participating residents. I like to hand over further to Dr. Deepender.
No, I want to put it on the
Yes.
I want to put it on the records. Want to thank Department of Neurology, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Dr. Padma, and Department of Neurology, PGI Chandigarh, Dr. Vivek Lal, for remembering me when I'm out of the circulation. And I really enjoy the day with a wonderful discussion with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you, sir. It's our fortunate that you are here, sir, to give us the blessings. And thank you, sir. Thank you, Sahil, sir. Thank you, Rupa, ma'am. Thank you, Ritusri, ma'am, for the wonderful discussion and excellent discussion case-based for the Parkinson's disease and their cognitive management and elaborating all the minute details. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all the speakers and senior residents of AIIMS and PGI for active participation in the case-based discussions. Thank you very much. And Anu, ma'am, we should wind up, ma'am.
Yeah, yes. So tomorrow we'll be coming up with neuroimmunology and neuro-ophthalmology. Please do join us at 6 p.m.
And our sincere apologies.
My is on Sunday, I think. Dr. Anu.